The morning I found my sister wearing my wedding dress, holding my engagement ring, and kissing my fiancé was the morning I realized that some betrayals cut so deep they change your DNA. But what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the identity she'd stolen wasn't just mine. It belonged to someone worth $9 billion. If you've ever had someone steal your life right out from under you, and then watched karma deliver the most satisfying justice you could imagine, you're going to love this story. Before we dive in, hit that like button if you believe in cosmic justice, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. My name is Laura Chen, and I'm 28 years old. What happened to me last month still makes me wake up in cold sweats, not from trauma, but from the sheer satisfaction of watching my entire family's world collapse in real time. Let me paint you a picture of my life before everything exploded. I lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment in downtown Seattle, worked as a project coordinator for a tech startup, and was engaged to my college sweetheart, Brandon. Nothing spectacular, nothing that would make headlines, just a normal life with normal problems. My sister Ashley, 2 years younger, had always been the golden child. Where I was practical and hardworking, she was charming and beautiful. Where I saved money and planned for the future, she lived in the moment and expected everything to work out. Our parents, David and Monica Chen, had always made it clear that Ashley was their pride and joy, while I was just there. "Laura's so responsible," Mom would say in that tone that made responsibility sound like a character defect. "Ashley has such a zest for life." I'd graduated summa cum laude from University of Washington with a degree in business administration. Ashley barely scraped by with a communications degree from a community college. But guess who got the family's financial support for her entrepreneurial ventures? Guess who got the down payment help when she wanted to move to Los Angeles to pursue acting? Not me. I'd worked 3 jobs to pay for my own education, lived on ramen noodles for 4 years, and still managed to graduate debt-free. My reward was being called too serious and lacking spontaneity. Brandon Matthews had been my anchor through all of this. We'd met in our sophomore year, and he understood my family dynamics better than anyone. He was patient, kind, and most importantly, he saw me for who I really was, not who my family wanted me to be. "Your parents don't deserve you," he'd say after particularly brutal family dinners where Ashley dominated the conversation while I sat invisible at the table. "You're going to show them all someday." I believed him. God help me, I believed him. The engagement had been simple but perfect. Brandon proposed on a hiking trail overlooking Puget Sound, with a ring he'd saved for 8 months to buy. Nothing flashy, nothing Instagram-worthy, just us and a promise of a future together. My parents' reaction was predictably lukewarm. Finally, Dad had said when I called to tell them. "We were starting to wonder if you'd ever settle down." "The ring is sweet," Mom added, her tone suggesting it was anything but. "Very practical." Ashley, who was visiting from LA where her acting career consisted mainly of serving tables and posting thirst traps on social media, had been more enthusiastic. "Oh my God, Laura. This is so exciting," she'd squealed, grabbing my hand to examine the ring. "It's so, you. Simple and practical." Even her compliments felt like insults. The wedding planning had been a nightmare from the start. Every suggestion I made was shot down, every decision questioned, every vendor I chose deemed not quite right by my mother and sister. "Are you sure about this venue?" Mom would ask, wrinkling her nose at the community center I'd booked because it was what we could afford. "It's very basic." "The dress you picked is fine," Ashley would add, "but don't you want something with more pizzazz?" Brandon and I had set the date for October 15th, exactly 1 year after our engagement. I'd spent months planning every detail, staying up late after work to research vendors, compare prices, and coordinate with our families. It was going to be small but beautiful, with our closest friends and family celebrating our love. The first red flag came 3 months before the wedding. I was at work when my phone buzzed with a notification from Instagram. Someone had tagged me in a photo. When I opened it, my blood ran cold. It was Ashley, wearing a dress identical to my wedding dress, posing with a man I didn't recognize in what looked like a high-end restaurant. The caption read, "When Bae surprises you with dinner at Lou Bernardine. Sometimes dreams do come true. Ring sparkles #blessed #engagement vibes my wedding dress. The one I'd spent 2 months saving for, the one hanging in my closet wrapped in protective plastic. How did she even know what it looked like? I called her immediately. Ashley, what the hell is this photo? What photo? Her voice was sickeningly sweet. The one where you're wearing my wedding dress at some fancy restaurant. She laughed, that tinkling sound that had always set my teeth on edge. Oh, that old thing? I found something similar at a vintage shop. Isn't it gorgeous? And this is my new boyfriend, Charles. He's a venture capitalist. It's identical to my dress, Ashley. Great minds think alike, I guess. Don't be so paranoid, Laura. The world doesn't revolve around you. But my gut told me otherwise. Ashley had been in my apartment plenty of times. She'd seen the dress hanging in my bedroom closet. She could have easily taken photos or even measurements. I tried to brush it off, but the feeling of unease lingered. The second red flag came 2 months later. Brandon had been acting strange for weeks. Distant, distracted, spending more time on his phone than usual. When I asked about it, he'd get defensive. I'm just stressed about work, he'd say, not meeting my eyes. The promotion is taking up all my mental energy. But I knew Brandon. We'd been together for 6 years. This wasn't work stress. This was something else. The truth hit me like a freight train on a Tuesday morning in September. I'd taken a sick day because of a migraine, something I rarely did. Around noon, I decided to surprise Brandon at his office with lunch from his favorite Thai place. Maybe we could reconnect, talk through whatever was bothering him. His office building was downtown, a sleek glass tower that always made me feel proud of his success. I signed in at the security desk and took the elevator to the 15th floor, carrying the bag of pad thai and green curry. The receptionist, Janet, looked surprised to see me. Oh, Laura. I didn't know you were coming in today. Just a surprise lunch for Brandon, I said, holding up the bag. Is he in his office? Janet's expression shifted to something I couldn't quite read. Confusion? Concern? Actually, he's in the conference room with a client. They've been in there for about an hour. No problem, I'll just wait in his office. Actually, Janet said quickly, maybe you should call first? It's a pretty important meeting. But I was already walking toward his office, keycard in hand. Brandon had given it to me months ago for situations exactly like this. His office was empty, just as Janet had said. I set the food on his desk and decided to wait. Maybe I could peek into the conference room, see how much longer his meeting would take. The conference room was at the end of the hall, its glass walls offering a clear view of the interior. What I saw there made my knees buckle. Brandon was sitting across from Ashley, but they weren't having a business meeting. His hand was covering hers on the table, and they were leaning toward each other in an intimacy that was unmistakably romantic. As I watched, frozen in the hallway, Ashley threw back her head and laughed at something Brandon said. The same laugh she'd used when dismissing my concerns about the dress photo. Brandon's face lit up in a way I hadn't seen in months. They looked like a couple. They looked like they were in love. I stumbled backward, my phone clattering to the floor. The sound echoed in the hallway, and both of them looked up. Brandon's face went white when he saw me standing there. I ran. I ran to the elevator, jabbed the button repeatedly, and when it finally arrived, I collapsed against the back wall as the door slid shut. My phone was buzzing incessantly, Brandon calling, Ashley calling, text messages pouring in. I turned it off. The next few hours were a blur. I drove aimlessly around the city, parked by the waterfront, and stared at the gray water while my life disintegrated around me. How long had this been going on? How had I missed it? How could the two people I trusted most in the world betray me so completely? By evening, I'd turned my phone back on to find 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. Brandon, Laura, please call me. I can explain. Ashley, it's not what you think, I promise. Brandon, please don't do anything rash. We need to talk. Ashley, you're overreacting. We were just having coffee. Mom, Ashley told me what happened. You need to calm down and think rationally. That last message stopped me cold. Ashley had already spun her version of events to our mother. I called Mom back. Laura, honey, she said before I could speak, Ashley explained everything. You caught them having an innocent business meeting and jumped to conclusions. You know how your anxiety makes you paranoid. Business meeting? Mom, they were holding hands. Ashley was upset about something and Brandon was comforting her. That's what good friends do. You really need to work on your jealousy issues before you get married. I hung up. That night, Brandon showed up at my apartment with flowers and apologies. Laura, please, you have to listen to me, he said through the door. It wasn't what it looked like. Ashley came to me for advice about her career. She's been struggling in LA and wanted to know about opportunities in Seattle. I was just trying to help your sister. Part of me wanted to believe him. 6 years of love and trust don't die easily. But something in my gut, some primal instinct, screamed that this was just the beginning. I opened the door. Swear to me, I said, looking into his eyes. Swear to me that nothing is going on between you and Ashley. I swear, he said without hesitation. Laura, you're the only woman I've ever loved. You're the only woman I want to marry. Ashley is your sister. I would never. He pulled me into his arms, and I let myself believe him. I wanted to believe him so desperately that I ignored every instinct telling me otherwise. Okay, I whispered into his chest. Okay. But I couldn't shake the image of them leaning toward each other, the way he'd looked at her, the familiarity in their body language. The third and final red flag came exactly 1 week before our wedding. I was at my parents' house helping Mom with last-minute preparations when Ashley arrived from LA. She'd flown in to be my maid of honor, something I was already regretting given recent events. Laura, she cried, sweeping into the kitchen like she owned the place. I have the most amazing news. She was practically glowing, her skin radiant, her smile brighter than I'd seen in years. What news? I asked cautiously. I'm moving back to Seattle permanently. I found the most incredible job opportunity, and I'm going to be closer to family again. Isn't that wonderful? Mom clapped her hands together. Oh, Ashley, that's fantastic. What kind of job? It's with a startup. Very hush-hush, but the pay is incredible and there's huge growth potential. I start right after the wedding. My stomach dropped. What startup? Ashley's eyes sparkled with mischief. I can't say yet, but let's just say I'll be working very closely with someone we all know. The way she said it, the emphasis on closely, made my blood run cold. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay next to Brandon, listening to his breathing, studying his face in the dim light from the street lamp outside our window. He looked peaceful, innocent, like the man I'd fallen in love with 6 years ago. But doubt had taken root, and it was growing like a cancer. At 3 a.m., I gave up on sleep and went to my laptop. If Ashley had gotten a job with a Seattle startup, maybe I could find some mention of it online. She wasn't exactly known for her discretion on social media. What I found made me physically sick. Ashley's Instagram, which I rarely checked, had been updated almost daily for the past month. Photos of her in Seattle, at restaurants I couldn't afford, wearing clothes that cost more than my monthly rent. But it wasn't the luxury that caught my attention, it was the reflection in a restaurant window in one photo. Brandon, sitting across from her at the table. I scrolled further back. More photos, more expensive locations, more reflections, and shadows that suggested she wasn't dining alone. One photo, taken at Pike Place Market 3 weeks ago, showed her hand wearing a ring. Not just any ring, a ring identical to mine, but larger, more expensive. My hand shook as I screenshotted everything. But the final piece of evidence came from an unexpected source, LinkedIn. Ashley had updated her profile. Her new position was listed as Senior Business Development Associate at Matthews & Associates Consulting. Matthews & Associates. Brandon's company. The same company where I'd found them having their innocent business meeting. I woke Brandon up. Brandon, I shook his shoulder. Brandon, wake up. He stirred, looking confused and vulnerable in the early morning light. Laura? What time is it? Are you okay? Ashley's working for your company. The change in his expression was subtle but unmistakable. The confusion faded, replaced by something guarded. What are you talking about? I showed him Ashley's LinkedIn profile. He sat up slowly, running his hands through his hair. Laura, I can explain. Then explain. She applied for the position. I didn't know she was your sister when HR sent me her resume. By the time I realized, she'd already interviewed with 3 other people and they'd made the decision to hire her. You didn't think to mention this to me? I was going to tell you after the wedding. I didn't want to stress you out with more drama. Drama? My sister getting a job at your company is drama? You know how you get about Ashley. I thought you'd assume the worst. What exactly would be the worst, Brandon? He looked at me then with an expression I'd never seen before. Pity mixed with something that might have been guilt. Laura, you're being paranoid again. Ashley needs a fresh start, and we have an opening. It's not personal. But everything about this felt personal. I spent the next 3 days in a haze of wedding preparations and mounting dread. Ashley flitted around the house like a butterfly, helping with decorations, charming our relatives, and being the perfect maid of honor. I'm so excited for Saturday, she gushed while we were arranging centerpieces. It's going to be the most beautiful wedding ever. Thank you for everything you've done to help, I said, trying to match her enthusiasm. Of course. That's what sisters are for. We stick together no matter what, right? Right, I agreed, though the word tasted like ash in my mouth. Friday night, the rehearsal dinner went perfectly. Brandon was attentive and loving, Ashley was supportive and sweet, and our families mingled happily in the private room we'd reserved at our favorite Italian restaurant. During his speech, Brandon took my hand and looked into my eyes with what seemed like genuine love. Laura, he said to the gathered group, you've made me the luckiest man in the world. Tomorrow, I get to marry my best friend, my soulmate, the woman who makes every day better just by being in it. Everyone applauded. Ashley wiped away a tear. I almost believed it was real. But at 11 p.m., as I was getting ready for bed at my parents' house, Brandon and I had decided to spend our last night as single people apart for tradition's sake. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Check Brandon's apartment. third drawer of his dresser. You deserve to know the truth before tomorrow. My blood turned to ice. I stared at the message, reading it over and over. Who had sent it? How did they know about Brandon's dresser? Why tonight, of all nights? I could have ignored it. I could have deleted the message and gone to sleep, woken up the next morning, and walked down the aisle into what might have been a happy marriage built on willful ignorance. But I couldn't. The doubt that had been growing for months had reached a crescendo, and I needed to know the truth, whatever it cost me. I drove to Brandon's apartment. He'd given me a key 2 years ago, back when we first started talking about marriage. I let myself in quietly, my heart hammering against my ribs. The apartment was dark and silent. Brandon was staying at his best man's house tonight, part of our pre-wedding tradition. I made my way to his bedroom, turned on the lamp, and stood before his dresser. Third drawer. My hands trembled as I pulled it open. At first, I saw only the usual things: old t-shirts, workout clothes, random cables and chargers. But then, tucked beneath a Columbia University sweatshirt I'd never seen him wear, I found a manila envelope. Inside were photos. Dozens of them. Brandon and Ashley at restaurants I recognized from her Instagram posts. Brandon and Ashley walking hand in hand through Pike Place Market. Brandon and Ashley kissing outside what looked like a jewelry store. But the photos that destroyed me completely were the ones taken in this very apartment. In Brandon's bed. Ashley wearing nothing but one of his t-shirts, laughing at something off camera. Brandon kissing her neck while she took a selfie. The timestamps showed they'd been taken throughout the past 3 months, sometimes on nights when Brandon had told me he was working late. At the bottom of the envelope was a hotel receipt from last weekend, when Brandon had supposedly gone to Portland for a conference. The King Suite at the Four Seasons. 2 guests. And beneath that, a letter in Ashley's handwriting: "My darling Brandon, I can't wait until this charade is over and we can finally be together openly. Laura suspects nothing, which makes this both easier and more heartbreaking. I know you feel guilty, but remember, we didn't plan this. Sometimes love just happens to the wrong people at the wrong time. After tomorrow, we'll wait a few months, then you can leave her amicably. By next Christmas, we'll be engaged with our own ring. A bigger one. Winking face, thank you for letting me wear the dress to dinner last week. Practicing for my own wedding day made it feel so real. All my love, Ashley P.S. I've already told Mom and Dad about us. They understand that these things happen and they're surprisingly supportive. They always knew we were better suited for each other." The letter fluttered from my numb fingers to the floor. They'd told my parents. My parents knew, and they were supporting Ashley's relationship with my fiancé. I thought about Mom's reaction when I'd seen Brandon and Ashley together at his office. The way she'd immediately dismissed my concerns and accused me of being paranoid. She'd known then. They'd all known. I was the only one who'd been living in ignorance. For a moment, I sat on Brandon's bed, the same bed where he'd been having sex with my sister while planning to marry me, and felt something inside me break. Not just my heart, though that was certainly shattered. Something deeper. Something fundamental to who I thought I was. I'd always been the good daughter, the responsible one, the one who worked hard and played by the rules. I'd believed that if I just tried hard enough, loved deeply enough, was good enough, I'd be rewarded with happiness. But goodness, I realized, was just another word for gullible. As I sat there surrounded by the evidence of their betrayal, a strange calm settled over me. The tears stopped. The shaking stopped. The desperate need to understand why they'd done this to me evaporated. I didn't need to understand it. I just needed to respond to it. And boy, did I have a response in mind. I carefully put everything back exactly as I'd found it, including the letter. Then I drove home to my parents' house, where Ashley was sleeping peacefully in the guest room, probably dreaming about her future with my fiancé. I didn't sleep at all that night. Instead, I sat at my childhood desk and planned the most satisfying revenge in the history of weddings. What Ashley and Brandon didn't know, what nobody in my family knew, was who I really was. Remember when I said I worked as a project coordinator for a tech startup? That was technically true, but it was the most spectacular understatement of the century. The tech startup was Evergreen Digital Solutions, and I wasn't just a project coordinator. I was the founder and CEO. But more than that, Evergreen Digital Solutions was a subsidiary of Chen Holdings, my investment firm that managed assets worth just over $9 billion. Yes, billion with a B. My parents thought I was barely scraping by in my modest apartment, working a dead-end job, struggling to afford my simple wedding. The truth was that I'd been building a business empire since college, starting with a small app I'd developed that got acquired by Microsoft for $12 million when I was 23. I'd used that money to invest in other startups, buy real estate, and slowly, quietly, build one of the most successful investment portfolios on the West Coast. By 25, I was worth $50 million. By 27, I'd hit my first billion. But I'd hidden it all. Why? Because I wanted to be loved for who I was, not what I was worth. I wanted relationships built on genuine connection, not financial interest. And after growing up watching Ashley manipulate people with charm while I was dismissed for being too practical, I decided to test whether anyone in my life actually valued me for me. Turns out, they didn't. But here's the thing about being secretly wealthy: you develop resources. Connections. Information networks. And when people betray you, you don't just have emotional revenge available, you have financial, legal, and social revenge that can reshape lives. My first call that night was to Marcus Webb, my head of security and information management. "Marcus," I said when he answered on the first ring. "I need a complete background check on Charles Whitman. The venture capitalist your sister's been posting about?" See, that's why I paid Marcus 7 figures a year. He already knew exactly who I was talking about. That's the one. I need to know everything about him by 8 a.m. Financial status, relationship history, legal troubles, family connections. Everything. Consider it done. Anything else? Brandon Matthews. Full investigation. I need to know if there are other women, other lies, anything that could be legally relevant. I'll have both reports in your inbox by morning. Are we moving to phase 2? Phase 2. Marcus and I had discussed this scenario hypothetically many times. What would happen if someone in my personal life tried to exploit or betray me? We developed contingency plans, never thinking I'd actually need them. "Yes," I said. "Execute the full protocol." "Understood." "Do you need emotional support staff?" "No. I'm actually okay." Angry, but okay. And I was. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again. Not the anxious, paranoid woman my family had made me believe I was, but the sharp, decisive CEO who'd built an empire from nothing. My second call was to Janet Morrison, my personal lawyer and the woman who'd handled every business deal I'd made for the past 5 years. "Laura? It's midnight. What's wrong?" I explained the situation in clinical detail. The affair, the family betrayal, the wedding that was supposed to happen in 14 hours. "Jesus Christ," Janet breathed when I finished. "I'm so sorry. But also, I'm kind of excited to destroy these people." "What's the plan?" "I want you at the wedding tomorrow as my +1. Bring the full documentation package. The net worth statements? The property deeds? All of it? Everything. And Janet? I want it ready to present publicly. Oh, we're doing the nuclear option. I love it. What about the prenup situation with Brandon? There is no prenup. We kept our finances completely separate, and he never knew about my assets. Legally, he has no claim to anything. Perfect. This is going to be the most expensive breakup of his life, and it won't cost him a penny. I love the poetic justice. My third call was to my assistant, David Kim. David, I need you to prepare the conference room for a special presentation tomorrow afternoon. The big conference room? How many people? About 50. My entire family, Brandon's family, and select members of the community. What kind of presentation? The kind that changes everything. By 6 a.m., I was showered, dressed in my wedding gown, and reading through the reports Marcus had compiled. Charles Whitman was indeed a venture capitalist, but he was also married with 3 children, currently going through a very messy divorce, and facing SEC investigations for securities fraud. His net worth was approximately negative $12 million, and he'd been using fake wealth displays to scam money from investors. Ashley had been dating a broke criminal who was using her for her supposed connections to my family's money. The irony was delicious. Brandon's report was shorter but equally satisfying. No other affairs, but a significant gambling problem that had left him $80,000 in debt to some very unfriendly people. He'd been planning to use our joint accounts after marriage to pay them off. Both men were using my sister and me for money they thought we had access to. At 9 a.m., my phone started ringing with calls from Brandon, Ashley, and my parents, all wondering where I was and why I wasn't answering. At 10 a.m., Janet arrived at my parents' house with a briefcase and a smile that could cut glass. "Ready to do this?" she asked. I've never been more ready for anything in my life. The wedding was set to begin at 2 p.m. in the backyard of my parents' house. They'd spent weeks transforming the space with white tents, flowers, and enough seating for 70 guests. It looked beautiful, like something out of a magazine. It was the perfect setting for a public execution. I arrived at 1:30 p.m., after all the guests had been seated. Ashley was waiting in my childhood bedroom, wearing a pale pink maid of honor dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. "Laura. There you are." I was starting to worry. "You look absolutely stunning." She hugged me, and I let her, marveling at how easily she could pretend affection for someone she was systematically destroying. "Thank you, Ashley. You look beautiful too." "I have something for you," she said, pulling out a small wrapped box. "A sister gift, for luck." Inside was a delicate gold bracelet with a small charm in the shape of a key. "It's the key to happiness," she explained. "May this marriage bring you everything you deserve." The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. "It's perfect," I said, fastening it around my wrist. "Thank you for being such a wonderful sister." We walked downstairs together, her arm linked through mine, just like when we were children playing dress-up. Except this time, she was playing dress-up with my entire life. The ceremony was set to begin in the backyard, but first, we had 30 minutes of mingling and photos in the living room. Brandon looked devastatingly handsome in his tuxedo, his smile bright and seemingly genuine as he greeted our families. When he saw me, his face lit up with what looked like pure love. "You're breathtaking," he whispered, taking my hands. "I'm the luckiest man alive." If I hadn't seen the photos of him with Ashley, hadn't read her letter, I might have believed him. His performance was flawless. "I love you too," I replied, squeezing his hands. Ashley fluttered around us, making sure everyone had drinks, adjusting flowers, playing the perfect maid of honor. Several guests commented on what a lovely family we were, how lucky I was to have such a supportive sister. At exactly 2 p.m., our officiant, Pastor Williams from the church I'd attended as a child, called everyone to take their seats outside. The procession was small but elegant. Ashley walked down the aisle first, her pink dress floating behind her like a cloud. She winked at Brandon as she took her place at the altar, a gesture that probably looked sisterly to everyone else but felt loaded with secret meaning to me. Then came my moment. Dad took my arm, and we stood at the back of the tent as the wedding march began to play. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," he whispered. "I'm proud of you." Proud. The word twisted in my chest. When had he ever been proud of me for anything that mattered? We walked down the aisle slowly, and I took in the faces of our guests. Brandon's parents, looking emotional and happy. My extended family, aunts and uncles and cousins I saw maybe twice a year. Friends from college, co-workers from Brandon's job, neighbors who'd watched me grow up. All of them here to witness what they thought was the happiest day of my life. Brandon's face when he saw me walking toward him was everything a bride could want. Pure joy, complete devotion, overwhelming love. If I'd been anyone else, if this had been any other day, that look would have melted my heart. Instead, it confirmed what I already knew: he was an excellent actor. Pastor Williams began the ceremony with a reading about love and commitment that felt like a cruel joke. Ashley stood to my left, holding my bouquet, her face glowing with happiness that I now knew was partly anticipation for her own future with my groom. "Dearly beloved," Pastor Williams intoned, "we are gathered here today to witness the union of Laura and Brandon in holy matrimony. Marriage is a sacred covenant, built on trust, honesty, and mutual respect." Trust. Honesty. Mutual respect. The universe had a sense of humor after all. "Brandon," Pastor Williams continued, "do you take Laura to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, until death do you part?" Brandon's voice was strong and clear. "I do." Liar. "Laura, do you take Brandon to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, until death do you part?" This was it. The moment of truth. I could say I do and live a lie, or I could burn it all down and start over. I looked into Brandon's eyes, so full of fake love and secret guilt. I looked at Ashley, practically vibrating with suppressed excitement. I looked at my parents, who'd known about the affair and chosen my sister anyway. Then I looked at Janet, sitting in the back row with her briefcase, giving me an almost imperceptible nod. "Actually," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the silent tent, "I have something to say first." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Pastor Williams looked confused. Brandon's smile flickered. "Laura?" Ashley whispered. "What are you doing?" I turned to face our guests, still holding Brandon's hands. Before I answer that question, I think there are some truths that need to come to light. "Janet, would you join me please?" Janet stood and walked to the altar, her heels clicking on the wooden platform we'd had installed. She set her briefcase on the small table that held our unity candle. "What's going on?" Brandon asked, his voice tight with panic. "The truth," I said simply. "Janet Morrison, everyone, is my personal attorney. She has some information that might interest you all." Janet opened her briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her lawyer voice clear and professional, "my client Laura Chen has asked me to share some facts about her life that may come as a surprise to many of you." The tent was dead silent except for the soft rustle of paper. First, contrary to what many of you believe, Laura is not a struggling project coordinator living paycheck to paycheck. She is the founder and CEO of Evergreen Digital Solutions and the principal owner of Chin Holdings, with a personal net worth of approximately $9.2 billion. The silence exploded into chaos. What? Dad's voice cracked like a whip. That's impossible, Mom gasped. Brandon dropped my hands like they were on fire. But Ashley's reaction was the most telling. Her face went through a spectrum of emotions: shock, confusion, and then, unmistakably, rage. "You're lying," she said, her sweet voice turning sharp. "Laura works at some tiny startup. She can barely afford this wedding." "Actually," Janet continued calmly, "Laura paid for this wedding herself, just as she's paid for most family expenses over the past 5 years without anyone's knowledge. She's also personally funded your sister's lifestyle in Los Angeles to the tune of approximately $200,000 over the past 2 years." "That's not true," Ashley shrieked. Janet pulled out bank statements. The money was transferred to accounts belonging to Charles Whitman, who then gave it to Ashley. Mr. Whitman, by the way, is married, bankrupt, and currently under federal investigation for securities fraud. Ashley's face went white. "But that's not why we're here," Janet continued. "Laura, would you like to share the real reason for this revelation?" I looked at Brandon, whose face had gone from confusion to dawning horror as he began to understand what was happening. "3 months ago," I said, my voice steady and clear, "my fiancé began an affair with my sister. They'd been planning to wait until after our marriage, then engineer a divorce so they could be together. My parents knew about this relationship and chose to support it." The tent erupted again. Gasps, shouts, chairs scraping as people stood up for better views. "That's a lie." Brandon finally found his voice. "Laura, you're having some kind of breakdown. This is all insane." "Janet, the evidence please." Janet pulled out printed copies of the photos I'd found in Brandon's dresser. She held them up for the crowd to see, Brandon and Ashley kissing, holding hands, in bed together. "These were taken in Mr. Matthews' apartment over the past 3 months, Janet announced. Along with this letter from Ashley to Brandon, detailing their plans. She began to read Ashley's letter aloud. Every word hit the crowd like a physical blow. My parents looked like they'd been struck by lightning. Brandon's parents were staring at their son with expressions of horror and disgust. But the most satisfying reaction came from Charles Whitman himself, who was sitting in the 3rd row as Ashley's guest. He stood up abruptly, his face purple with rage. "You told me she was worth millions," he shouted at Ashley. "You said your family had money." "I thought they did." Ashley screamed back. "So you've been lying to both of us," I observed calmly. "Charles, you've been using Ashley to get access to my family's supposed wealth. Ashley, you've been using Charles to fund your lifestyle while planning to dump him for Brandon. And Brandon, you've been using me to pay off your gambling debts while planning to leave me for Ashley." I looked out at the stunned faces of our guests. "The beautiful thing about having unlimited resources," I continued, "is that you can afford to learn the truth about everyone in your life. Charles owes approximately $2 million to various creditors and bookies. Brandon owes $80,000 to some very dangerous people. And Ashley has been spending my money, filtered through Charles, to fund her fake lifestyle while seducing my fiancé." I turned back to Brandon, who looked like he might faint. "So to answer Pastor Williams' question, no, Brandon, I do not take you to be my husband. I do not promise to have and to hold you. And I certainly don't promise to be with you for richer or poorer, since you were clearly only interested in the richer part." I slipped off my engagement ring and held it out to him. "This belongs to you. The apartment lease that's in my name is being terminated. Your belongings will be packed and waiting for you by tomorrow morning. The credit cards that I've been secretly paying off? Cancelled. The car loan I co-signed? You're now solely responsible for it. Brandon's face had gone gray. Laura, please, we can work this out. I can explain everything. The time for explanations was 3 months ago. Or 2 months ago. Or last week. Or this morning. You had 1,000 chances to tell me the truth, and instead, you chose to humiliate me in front of everyone I know. I turned to Ashley, who was crying now, her carefully applied makeup running down her cheeks. And you, dear sister. The credit cards I opened for your emergencies? Cancelled. The money I've been sending to help with your rent? Stopped. The car I bought you? Being repossessed tomorrow. You wanted my life so badly, but you never bothered to find out what my life actually was. Laura, Mom stood up, her voice shaking, you can't do this. They're family. Family? I laughed, and the sound was sharp enough to cut glass. Family doesn't lie, cheat, and steal from each other. Family doesn't choose sides when one child betrays another. Family doesn't enable adultery and then gaslight the victim. I looked at my parents with something that felt like pity. You've spent my entire life making it clear that Ashley was your favorite, that she was the daughter you were proud of while I was just the responsible backup plan. Well, congratulations. You got your wish. Ashley can be your only daughter now, and you can figure out how to fund her lifestyle yourselves. Dad stood up slowly, his face haggard. Laura, we didn't know about your money. If we had known. If you had known I was worth billions, you would have treated me better? That's supposed to make me feel good about our relationship? The truth hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Janet cleared her throat. There are a few more legal matters to address. Mr. Matthews, the money you've been taking from the joint accounts that Laura contributed to will need to be repaid. Ms. Ashley Chen, the gifts and financial support you received under false pretenses constitute fraud. And Mr. and Mrs. Chen, the defamation of character you've engaged in regarding Laura's mental state and credibility has been documented and will be addressed through appropriate channels. I looked out at the crowd one final time. Some faces showed disgust for Brandon and Ashley. Others showed shame for having believed their lies. A few showed naked calculation as they realized they'd been dismissing a billionaire for years. Thank you all for coming, I said with genuine warmth. I'm sorry the wedding didn't work out, but I think we can all agree that the truth was more important than the ceremony. The bar is still open, and dinner will be served as planned. Please, stay and enjoy yourselves. I started to walk down the aisle, my wedding dress rustling with each step. Laura. Ashley's voice cracked like a whip. You can't just leave. This is insane. You're destroying our family over nothing. I stopped and turned back to her. Nothing? You stole my fiancé. You've been living off my money while lying to my face. You convinced our parents to side with you in your betrayal. You wore my wedding dress on dates with Charles to practice for stealing my wedding day. Nothing? It's not like that, she sobbed. You don't understand. Brandon and I fell in love. It just happened. We couldn't help it. You're right, I said calmly. Love can't be helped. But lies can be. Theft can be. Manipulation can be. You chose to handle your feelings in the cruelest way possible, and now you get to live with the consequences. I looked at Brandon one last time. And you. I loved you for 6 years. I would have done anything for you. All you had to do was be honest with me. If you'd fallen out of love, if you'd wanted to be with Ashley, I would have been heartbroken, but I would have let you go. Instead, you chose to deceive me, use me, and humiliate me. That wasn't love talking. That was greed. I walked out of the tent, leaving behind not just a wedding, but an entire life that had been built on other people's lies about who I was and what I was worth. Janet followed me, and as we reached the house, I could hear the chaos erupting behind us. Shouting, crying, accusations flying in every direction. "How do you feel?" Janet asked. I considered the question seriously. How did I feel? "Free," I said finally. "For the first time in my adult life, I feel completely free." "What's next?" I smiled, and it felt genuine for the first time in months. "Now I go live my actual life. The one I built for myself. The one where I don't have to pretend to be smaller than I am to make other people comfortable." 3 months later, I was sitting in my real home, not a modest apartment, but a mansion overlooking Elliott Bay, reading the latest updates on my former family's situation. Brandon had been forced to declare bankruptcy when his gambling debts came due and he no longer had access to my money. He'd moved back in with his parents and was working at a call center. Ashley had returned to Los Angeles, but without my financial support and Charles's fake wealth, she was back to waiting tables and auditioning for roles she'd never book. Charles was in federal prison awaiting trial. My parents had tried to reach out several times, but I'd blocked all their communications. I'd heard through mutual acquaintances that they were struggling financially without my secret support and that they blamed Ashley for ruining everything. The irony was perfect. Ashley had spent her whole life being the golden child, the favored daughter, the one who could do no wrong. Now she was the one who'd destroyed the family, while I, the supposedly inferior daughter, had risen above it all. I'd donated $10 million to organizations that supported women leaving abusive relationships, because I'd learned that financial abuse was just as real as physical abuse, and gaslighting was just as damaging as hitting. My story had somehow leaked to the press, probably through one of the wedding guests, and had become a viral sensation. Billionaire CEO exposes wedding day betrayal had been trending for weeks. I'd received thousands of messages from people sharing their own stories of family betrayal and manipulation. But the most satisfying outcome was professional. My company had grown by 40% in the 3 months since the wedding, as investors and partners who'd previously overlooked me suddenly wanted to do business with the woman who'd handled betrayal with such strategic precision. I'd also started dating again. Dr. James Harrison, a pediatric surgeon who'd read about my story and reached out not for business reasons, but because he'd gone through a similar experience with his own family. He understood the unique pain of being valued only for what you could provide, not who you were. Our first date had been a simple coffee, where we'd talked about everything except money. He'd picked me up in a 10-year-old Honda, and I'd loved him for it. "I need you to know," he'd said on our third date, "that I looked you up online after I heard your story. I know how wealthy you are. But I want to be clear that it doesn't matter to me. I make enough money to take care of myself and my daughter. I'm not looking for a benefactor." It was the most romantic thing anyone had ever said to me. 6 months later, James and I were engaged. But this time, I knew the difference between someone who loved me and someone who needed me. The wedding was small, private, and absolutely perfect. Just 30 people who genuinely cared about us, no drama, no manipulation, no lies. And you know what the best part was? Neither Ashley nor my parents even knew it was happening. They were no longer part of my life, which meant they were no longer part of my story. As I'd learned that day in the wedding tent, sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying someone's life. Sometimes it's simply living your own life so well that their absence becomes a gift. The moment Ashley realized she'd stolen the identity of a billionaire, tried to manipulate a billionaire, and lied to a billionaire was the moment her entire world collapsed. But the real revenge wasn't the money she lost or the lifestyle she couldn't maintain. The real revenge was that she'd spent her entire life being the favorite child, the golden daughter, the one everyone loved and supported. In one afternoon, she became the daughter who'd destroyed the family, who'd lost the billionaire sister, who'd thrown away more money than most people see in a lifetime for a cheating fiancé and a criminal boyfriend. Brandon lost his meal ticket, his future wife, and his financial security all in one day. But worse than that, he lost his reputation. Everyone at his company, everyone in our social circle, everyone who'd witnessed his humiliation knew exactly what kind of man he was. My parents lost their safety net, their favorite daughter's happiness, and any hope of a relationship with their successful child. They'd chosen Ashley over me so many times that when the truth came out, there was no relationship left to salvage. But me? I gained everything. Freedom from their manipulation, clarity about who truly cared about me, and the ability to live authentically for the first time in my adult life. Looking back, I realize that the most painful betrayals often come with the greatest gifts. If Ashley hadn't stolen my fiancé, if my parents hadn't chosen her over me, if Brandon hadn't lied to my face for months, I might have spent my entire life pretending to be smaller than I was to make other people comfortable. Instead, I learned that the people who truly deserve a place in your life will love you for who you are, not what you can do for them. Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted was living a completely different life behind your back? Has your family ever made you feel like you had to hide your success to keep them comfortable? Share your story in the comments. I read every single one, and sometimes the most healing thing is knowing you're not alone. If this story resonated with you, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. There are more stories about boundary setting, family dynamics, and the beautiful moment when truth finally comes to light. And remember, you never have to make yourself smaller to make someone else feel bigger. The right people will celebrate your success, not resent it. Thanks for listening to my story. Until next time, remember that sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to dim your light for people who prefer you in the dark.